So I started my career with the Maryland State Police, but early on in my Maryland State Police career, I worked undercover. A lot of that work brought me into Baltimore City, working with the Baltimore Police Department. During that time, there was a Baltimore City police detective who was killed, Marty Ward, making an undercover drug buy. Um, I went on to commanding drug task forces around the state. Had 7 at one time as a lieutenant, and then as a captain and major, I had 9 for the entire eastern part of the state. I then went into training. I commanded training for the Maryland State Police, and then when I retired from there, I was recruited by Baltimore City to come and to run their training division. In The Wire, you see a lot of what's wrong with drug policy for those who have seen it, and some examples of that are just the heavy-handed policing from police officers working in the community, treating everyone as though they're a criminal, violating the constitutional rights and the civil rights of people, and not being held accountable for that. The overtime, the financial benefit to police officers for working drugs, for pulling people up, for making the arrest, simple possession arrest, not really focusing on or really even caring about the main issue, which is addiction, right? People who have a health, physical and mental health challenge. It's just about numbers, and it leads to corruption, it leads to over policing, it leads to, again, the violation of our constitutional rights. And there's very little, if any, accountability for that. So it continues and continues and continues. Let me begin with a very quick quote from The Wire. It was the Western District Commander, Bunny Colvin. He's in his office and he's speaking to his drug sergeant, his undercover drug sergeant, and he says, this war on drugs have ruined the policing profession. And you're going to get a sense of what he meant by that when I start to talk about my career and what I've seen regarding drug prohibition policies and policing. I'm going to give a really current example. Again, going back to the Baltimore Police Department. There was a unit, and I'm only going back just a few years, the Gun Trace Task Force. Now, this is a unit that was assembled by the police department command staff to go out to find drugs and guns. So they were not in uniform. They rode around in plain cars, and they would just stop people at random if they thought someone was carrying a gun, if they thought someone was carrying or holding drugs. Because we in policing have done a good job of marrying drug possession and gun possession. So if you have drugs, then you have guns. That's how we think. And this is what we've done to ourselves. So this task force of these police officers, to get right to the point, they were eventually investigated by the FBI. Now, why were they investigated by the FBI? Because they were planting guns on people, because they were themselves doing home invasions. When they thought someone was in the business of selling drugs, they would literally do a home invasion to get the money and the drugs, and not to charge them with a crime, not to arrest them, but corruption, to take the money for their own benefit and use it and divide it up among themselves. The sergeant was taking the drugs that they would find, give them to a friend of his who would then sell them, and the drugs would go back into the community. So, a couple of points here. Number one, there's the personal greed, the corruption of, and they try to justify it for themselves. Well, these are criminals that have tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. These are thugs. These are criminals. We're going to take that money and we're going to use it for ourselves and put it to good use, pay our bills and do whatever, divide it up among ourselves. And the same thing with their drugs. When they themselves had become the criminals, even worse than the criminals. So there's that personal greed. And then the orders that come down from command, from high up, get me the numbers. We want to make this look good. We want to make it look like we're out there solving violent crime and getting drugs off our street, because then it looks good for the mayor. It looks good from a political perspective, so that mayor can get reelected. So they're given instructions and orders to go out here, and as long as they're bringing in the guns, as long as they're making the arrests and confiscating the drugs, and those numbers continue to go up, the commanders don't even want to know how they're doing it. It's like plausible deniability, right? Just don't tell me anything, just keep bringing me the results. And this is what you end up with. The FBI investigated this group of criminals wearing the badge, and most of them are now behind bars serving time where they should be. So our drug policies have put us at odds with the people, with the community. Again, because the first thing that's on our minds as police officers, this is the culture here, this is what's ingrained in us, is to, how can I search you, right? How can I find the drugs that I believe you have and then arrest you? I'm not concerned about anything else regarding your life. I just want to get the numbers so that I get the pat on the back, get the promotion, get the great assignment or whatever. That's the culture of policing here in the United States. There's a really direct connection between the history of policing in this country, dealing with, again, the culture, race, and so on. And then when you look at immigration today, we're seeing the same things here in this country, and I also think in other countries as well, where we have mass migration for a number of different reasons. Here, some are actually coming here from Central America for safety. A lot are coming for safety. The cartels have made it extremely difficult for people to live safely in their countries and to thrive in their countries. So they're coming north. Some are being forced to come north. And again, the foundation of all of this are drug prohibition policies that give the cartels their power, give them their money, give them their influence and political corruption power. What that also does relative to policing, it tends to paint immigrants in a very bad light. And unfortunately, we have people in political positions who continue to spew this propaganda, this false propaganda, and to the point where people believe that anyone who is migrating from the South here in the United States, from Mexico, from Honduras, from other countries south of our border, are criminals, are selling drugs, are violent people. And then we in policing are given the job of enforcing those policies, from Border Patrol to our local sheriff's departments to our state police agencies. And it's not, again, it's not where we need to be in policing. It's not part of what policing should be. We have to find a way to put as much distance as possible in between politics, our political landscape, and policing. And the only way I can think of doing that is that our policing entities, our local and state police agencies, mainly local, need to be governed and controlled by the people. I don't know whether that's through a board, a group of citizens and business leaders. It just cannot be controlled by one political leader, such as a mayor or a governor or a county executive. That's when we go off the rails, and that's when policies not only become ineffective but become problematic for our communities. Many of the people who end up being arrested due to some of these policies are actually victims of human trafficking. And we don't do a deep enough dive to find out exactly what's going on. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm arresting you for transporting drugs, right? And we don't do a deep enough dive to find out that this person and their family are under threat to do this work. Um, and most of these folks, because we're under the belief that they're immigrants and that's the only reason they're doing this work. So we begin to view most, if not all, immigrants as people who are trying to upset or harm our communities that we live in. Say from a policing perspective, where you have that chain of command, where you have that clear line of communication in your agency, it's up to the police leaders and the commanders to ensure that the right information, the correct information, and not just information, but then the response of our police officers within that community of immigrants is correct. And then you hold people accountable for how they interact with our immigrant populations and everyone within our communities. Again, I think if we can do a better job of changing our drug policies in this country and beyond, but I'm speaking about this country, we can do a better job of changing our drug policies, moving away from prohibition to more of a public health model. I think that's a great beginning, because so much of this sits upon the foundation of our corrupt drug policies, of our problematic drug policies. And in the 1980s, President Reagan implemented a civil forfeiture program here in the United States, and this is key to because again we're talking about corruption, we're talking about finances, and related to that. For those that don't know what civil forfeiture is relative to drug policies here in this country, what it is that our government officials can literally, if we believe that the money you possess or the car that you use has been used or it's tied to criminal activity relative to, say, transporting or selling drugs, we can seize it. Not criminally, but civilly, we can seize it and put the burden upon you to prove that your property, in a sense, your car or your money, is not guilty. So it's not about you being guilty or not. It's about the property or the money being guilty. I know it sounds weird, strange, but it's true. So why is this important? It's important because many of our, just say, for instance, sheriff's departments in this country rely heavily upon the proceeds of civil forfeiture. Whether it's stopping someone on, just say, an interstate highway for a traffic violation, then asking that person, oh, by the way, would you happen to be carrying large sums of money? Well, yeah, I have $5,000 because I'm on my way to buy a car that I saw online. I have reason to believe, this is the officer, I have reason to believe that money is the proceeds are tied to some illegal activity relative to drugs. So I'm going to seize that money. Here's your receipt. You can get your attorney and you can fight to get it back. I mean, that's as easy as it is. Now, that money can then be used by that sheriff's department to buy things, to pay salaries, to pay overtime. And they do this day after day, time after time. A big seizure would be, say, I knock on your door and I smell, just say, marijuana. Now, I can get a search warrant, search your house, say I do find, say you are growing some plants of marijuana, say for your own personal benefit. And now your house is paid for. I can seize your home and sell your home. So these are policies that lead to the financial benefit of police officers and police departments that then feeds corruption that appears to be legal. So it's not just incentive for the individual police officer. That one policy of civil forfeiture is beneficial to the officer, it's beneficial to the entire police department, it's even beneficial to that local government, that county or that town, who now doesn't have to fund much of what that police department does. That's, again, and that policy of civil forfeiture, again, sits upon drug prohibition policies. So again, there's that foundation, there's that corruption, and that beginning, that legal corruption, what Reagan thought was a good thing of taking the proceeds, the bona fide proceeds of a serious drug kingpin, and then reverting that to community use. That was the main intention of that policy. But now it has morphed into something that, in my mind, is in fact criminal.